August 22nd, 1911. The Louvre Museum in Paris, the largest and most famous art gallery in the world. The painter Louis Béraud arrives to sketch his latest work, a commentary on Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa. But when he arrives at the Salon Carré where the painting should be, he finds only an empty space on the wall, marked by 4 iron hooks. He assumes the painting has been taken to be photographed, a common occurrence. But after hours of waiting, a guard is sent to check. The photographers say they don't have it. Panic begins to set in. A frantic, museum-wide search is launched. Finally, the horrifying, almost unbelievable truth is confirmed. The Mona Lisa, the jewel of the Louvre, was gone. The news hit the world like a bombshell. How could the most recognizable painting in the world simply vanish from the most prestigious museum on Earth? What followed was a chaotic 2-year international manhunt, an investigation that would accuse famous artists, spark wild conspiracy theories, and turn a simple portrait into the global icon we knew today. This is the incredible and surprisingly simple true story of the man who stole the Mona Lisa. To understand the crime, you first have to understand the prize. The Mona Lisa was not just any painting. It was the culmination of a lifetime of genius. Leonardo da Vinci began the portrait around 1503, and it is believed to be a deception of Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a Florentine merchant. But Leonardo never delivered the painting to the family. He became obsessed with it, carrying it with him for the rest of his life, constantly adding impossibly thin layers of glaze to perfect her enigmatic smile and the smoky dreamlike atmosphere known as sfumato. So, how did an Italian masterpiece end up in Paris? It wasn't stolen by Napoleon, as many believed. In 1516, Leonardo was invited to France by King Francis I. He brought the Mona Lisa with him. After Leonardo's death, the painting was acquired by the king and became a part of the French royal collection. For centuries, it hung in the grand palaces of Paris. After the French Revolution, it found its permanent home in the Louvre. It was a national treasure, a symbol of French culture. And yet, in 1911, the Mona Lisa was not the global celebrity she is today. Within the Louvre's vast collection, art critics and connoisseurs often considered works by Titian and Raphael to be far superior. She was famous, certainly, but her myth was about to be born from the most unlikely of events: her absence. The Louvre in 1911 was not the high-security fortress we know now. It was a gilded labyrinth, a former royal palace with over 1,000 rooms connected by a confusing maze of corridors, staircases, and courtyards. It was run on a shoestring budget, with only about 150 guards to patrol its miles of galleries, a hopelessly inadequate number. Security was an afterthought. Cleaning ladies propped open fire doors for fresh air. And on Mondays, when the museum was closed for maintenance, hundreds of workers, artists, and photographers roamed the halls with very little supervision. The museum, in retrospect, a thief's paradise. The morning of Tuesday, August 22nd, began like any other. It was the painter Louis Béraud who first noticed the empty space on the wall. He joked with the section head of guards, who assumed the painting was with the museum's official photographers. But when the guard checked, the photographers were adamant. They did not have the Mona Lisa. The guard reported back. Still, there was no alarm. The museum officials assumed it must have been taken by another department for cleaning or study. For hours, a casual, then increasingly frantic, search was conducted. Officials checked every gallery, every office, every storeroom. By late afternoon, the dawning horror could no longer be ignored. The director of the National Museums was called. The police were notified. The investigation began. The museum was sealed, a crime scene of cultural significance. Police swarmed the building. They soon found their first clue. In a small, dusty service stairwell, they discovered the painting's heavy, protective glass case and its ornate wooden frame. The thief had been in a hurry, but had been methodical enough to abandon the bulky parts. And on the glass, he left behind one more thing: a single, clear thumbprint. The head of investigation, Alphonse Bertillon, a pioneer in forensic science, was confident. France had the world's largest collection of fingerprints. With this print, he believed they had their man. When the news broke, all of France was thrown into a state of national mourning and outrage. The headlines were sensational. "Unbelievable," screamed Le Matin. "The Mona Lisa is gone." The borders of France were sealed. Every ship and train leaving the country was searched. The Louvre was closed for a week, and when it reopened, thousands of Parisians lined up not to see the art, but to stare in somber silence at the 4 empty hooks on the wall, leaving flowers as if visiting a grave. With no leads, the press and the public filled the void with wild theories. Was it a sophisticated gang of international art thieves planning to sell the masterpiece to a repulsive American millionaire like JP Morgan? Was it an act of cultural terrorism by France's greatest rival, Germany? Or was it an inside job? The police interviewed all 257 employees who had a master key. They also fingerprinted them all, but the thumbprint from the crime scene matched no one. Desperate for breakthrough, the investigation took a bizarre and dramatic turn into the heart of Paris' bohemian art scene. A few years prior, a series of small Iberian statues had been stolen from the Louvre by a Belgian adventurer. He had in turn sold them to a friend, a young, struggling but brilliant Spanish painter named Pablo Picasso. Around the same time, another of Picasso's friends, the celebrated avant-garde poet Guillaume Apollinaire, had publicly called for the Louvre to be burned to the ground, arguing it was a prison for art. When a newspaper offered a reward for information, Apollinaire's disgruntled former assistant went to the police and accused him of being the mastermind. In September 1911, Apollinaire, one of France's most famous poets, was arrested and thrown in jail. During a harsh interrogation, the terrified poet implicated his friend Pablo Picasso. Picasso was brought in for questioning. He was terrified of being arrested and deported. In a dramatic courtroom confrontation, he denied everything. When the judge asked him if he knew Guillaume Apollinaire, Picasso, in a moment of pure panic, looked at his friend and claimed he had never seen him before. Both men were eventually cleared, but the incident left a deep scar on their friendship and on Picasso himself. The police were back to square one. The world's greatest art heist was a complete and total mystery. For 2 long years, there was silence. The empty space on the Louvre's wall became a permanent symbol of a national wound. It seemed the painting was lost forever. The thief, it appeared, had committed the perfect crime. But the real culprit was not a German spy, an American millionaire, or a modernist painter. He was a 30-year-old Italian immigrant named Vincenzo Perugia. He was a handyman, a glazier, and a house painter who had briefly worked at the Louvre. In fact, he had been part of a team hired to install the very glass cases meant to protect the museum's most valuable paintings, including the Mona Lisa. He knew the museum's layouts, its routines, and its weaknesses. Perugia was a simple, quiet man, living in a small, dingy apartment in Paris. He was an Italian patriot, and like many of his countrymen, felt the sting of anti-Italian sentiment in the city. His plan was born not of genius-level complexity, but of breathtaking simplicity. On Sunday, August 20th, 1911, Perugia, knowing the museum would be closed the next day, simply hid inside a small, unlocked art supply closet. He waited overnight. On Monday morning, while the museum was a hive of maintenance activity, Perugia put on a white worker's coat, the same kind worn by all other employees. In an instant, he became invisible. He walked into the Saloon Carré. It was empty. He lifted the 200-pound painting and its frame off the wall. He carried it to a deserted service staircase, a place he knew would be quiet. There, he quickly removed the portrait from its heavy frame and glass case. He wrapped the small poplar wood panel in a white cloth and hid it under his coat, and headed for the exit. He encountered only one problem: a locked door. As he was trying to remove the doorknob, a plumber happened to walk by. Seeing a fellow worker apparently stuck, the plumber cheerfully opened the door for him with his own key. Perugia thanked him, walked out in the streets of Paris, and vanished. For the next 2 years, while the world searched for his masterpiece, Vincenzo Perugia kept the Mona Lisa in his small apartment, hidden in the false bottom of a wooden trunk. He would take it out and look at it, the most famous missing object on Earth sitting on his kitchen table just a few miles from Louvre. After 2 years of hiding his prize, Perugia decided it was time to act. His life in Paris had not improved, and he was running out of money. He decided to return to his homeland of Italy, smuggling the Mona Lisa with him in his trunk. He believed his crime was not a theft, but a noble act of repatriation. He mistakenly believed that the Mona Lisa had been stolen from Italy by Napoleon, and he saw it as his patriotic duty to return it. In late 1913, from his home in Florence, Perugia wrote a letter to an intellectual art dealer named Alfredo Geri. He offered to sell him the Mona Lisa for a reward of 500,000 lira. Geri, the art dealer, was intrigued. He thought it was likely a prank or an offer for a copy, but the chance it was real was too great to ignore. He contacted Giovanni Poggi, the director of the world-famous Uffizi Gallery. Together, they devised a plan. They would play along. Geri replied to the letter, agreeing to a meeting. Perugia arrived at Geri's gallery. After some negotiation, he took the two men to his room at the Hotel Tripoli, Italia. There, he opened his trunk, removed the false bottom, and presented the painting. Geri and Poggi were stunned. It was, without a doubt, the real Mona Lisa. They recognized the unique and the official Louvre stamp on the back. They feigned excitement, agreeing to Perugia's price, but told him they needed to take the painting to the Uffizi to authenticate it and compare it with other Da Vinci works. Perugia, proud of his patriotic act and believing he was dealing with honest men, agreed. As soon as he left, they called the police. Vincenzo Perugia was arrested in his hotel room without a fight. The crime of the century was solved. When the news broke, Perugia became an overnight celebrity in Italy. He was hailed as a national hero, a patriot who had risked everything to bring a stolen treasure back to its motherland. His trial was a spectacle. He explained his simple, patriotic motive, and the Italian court was deeply symptomatic. For stealing the most famous painting in the world, he was sentenced to just over 1 year in prison, and ended up serving only 7 months. The Mona Lisa went on a tour in Italy. Massive crowds gathered in Rome, Florence, and Milan to catch a glimpse of the masterpiece before it was returned to France. The simple, audacious crime of Vincenzo Perugia, the man in the white coat, ironically did more for the painting's fame than Leonardo da Vinci ever could. The 2 years she was missing transformed her from an artwork treasure into a global celebrity. Her empty space on the wall had become a canvas for the world's imagination. When she returned, she was no longer just a painting. She was a story. The Louvre immediately built a special, more secure enclosure for her, and she became the museum's undisputed main attraction. Perugia's theft is what cemented the Mona Lisa's status as the most famous, most iconic, and most valuable painting in human history. He had set out to be a patriot, but had accidentally become the greatest publicist in the history of art.